Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and welcome everybody as we prepare for X-Men 97 Season 2, which will be released on Disney Plus. I figured let's go over Season 1, because who has the time these days to go back and rewatch a series, a season of television to try to get caught up. Now, X-Men 91 does a excellent job of previously on, to get you caught up before we get into the episodes and whatnot. But I wanted to do my own previously on. I wanted to go back and watch season 1, which I did, because I enjoyed season 1 so much. I thought it was not only nostalgic going back to 1997, well, actually the 90s period, because the original X-Men the Animated Series premiered in 1992, and it lasted until 1997, and this picks up right after that. I mean, directly after that series came to an abrupt end. And I much commend the showrunners of X-Men 97 for doing so, because they could have went in so many different directions with this property. I mean, it's X-Men, which pick a story. There's a saga that you can pick up on in the X-Men lore that you could just jump off and do your own thing. But no, everybody, I think universally knew that the definitive animated series is X-Men from the 90s. There's X-Men and there's Batman, the animated series. Those are the two greatest animated series of all time, especially for comic book lovers. But I think for the casual viewer, there's no complaints for those shows. But X-Men just had his own thing. I mean, you really can't compare the two. I know I threw that out there, but you really can't compare the two. They're two completely different stories that are being told. And of course, two different comic book companies, but they all have their charm. And X-Men 97, or X-Men Animated Series, I should say, had a different feel to it. It was a kid's show that was so adult. And during that era, growing up, me, I had just became a teenager at that time, and just about to break into adulthood, at least in my mind. And, you wanted adult stories and adult storytelling. But at the same time, you wanted to clinch and hold on to that childhood, your love for comic books and superheroes. And X-Men 97 was the perfect blend of the two. This was an animated series that you can watch with your dad, with your parents, with grown-ups, and they can enjoy it just as much as a 6 or 7-year-old kid can enjoy it. It was a family show, oddly to say, but it was so adult, and a lot of adult content, but not too adult to whereas parents would be like, nah, I don't think you should be watching that. It didn't cross that line. But the older you get, especially if you were a parent around this time, an older person around this time in the 90s, you knew that, man, this is some adult stuff that they're touching on, even though they're not explicitly saying Nazis or, homosexuality, xenophobia and stuff like that, racism and all that. All that wasn't said, but it was implied, and it was implied in a way that it can resonate with kids and adults alike, but yet enjoy this fantastical comic book superhero mutant thing, and stay true to the comics. One of the most accurate depictions of a comic book property that I have ever seen on TV or film alike. And when Marvel Studios and Disney Plus decided, okay, we're going to revamp this show. We're going to pick up right when that show left off. I was like a kid in a candy store. I reverted back to 13, 14-year-old Kevin and was like, oh my God, it's happening. Something that I never thought would happen in my lifetime. And honestly wasn't asking for it, because I never expected this to happen, to pick up and continue a story from 30 years ago. It's in work, but it happened. And wouldn't you know, unless, in case you don't know, for all of you out there, my birthday is March the 20th, the first day of spring. And wouldn't you know, as a great birthday present in 2024, on March the 20th on Disney Plus, we got the premiere of X-Men 97 season 1. And I would tell you, man, it was like a sign from above. it was meant to be. This had to happen. This was tailor-made for me, and we jumped right in. First and foremost, immediately once the show started, I immediately was thrust back to 1997 because the animation style, even though it was subtly different, it was the same. And so it really kept that vibe going. You had the same tone, but it was different as we got into the storytelling. Bo DeMeo, who was the head writer of season 1, co-creator of the show, also show ran for season 1. Look, I'm not going to dive into the reason why he was fired and let go by Marvel and all this stuff. Honestly, because I don't know the reason why. I don't know. I've heard so many stories, read so many stories. I've seen the video with Bo DeMaio released about why he was let go, and I was more confused than anything. I don't know the reason, but I can't talk on his personal life or what happened behind the scenes, but his work on this show can't be denied. I can't take that away. So let's recap this season 1 as we prepare for season 2 to drop on Disney Plus. It's a continuation of the story of the X-Men following the loss of their leader, Professor X. In the season, the X-Men face a threat of a new Sentinel program created by Mister Sinister and Bastion. And that didn't even scratch the surface. That's just one of the many stories and plot lines that we got throughout this first season. Let's jump into episode 1, To Me, My X-Men. This episode premiered on March the 20th, 2024, along with the second episode as well. But this is picking up a year after the assassination attempt on Professor X, Charles Xavier, that led to Professor X leaving Earth with the alien She-Ra and being presumed dead at this point. And the X-Men, they didn't let that stop them. They continued their missions to defend mutants and humans as well. And Xavier's supposed death has led to the X-Men being legally sanctioned by the UN, the United Nations. And so we start the episode with a young mutant named Roberto. He's being harassed by the Friends of Humanity, the Proud Boys of the X-Men universe, who are using Sentinel technology to fight against mutants. And so we get the X-Men coming in and saving the day. One of the first X-Men to save Roberto was Jubilee. And this was a very interesting start, because if you remember all the way back in 1992, the first episode of X-Men the United, the animated series, it was Jubilee being saved. That was the start of the show. So to start the kind of not reboot, but the continuation 30 years later and have Jubilee the one doing the saving was a very smart move by the showrunners there. I thought it was a nice nod to the one that got us here, the original show. And so to find Sentinel creator Bolivar Taz, the X-Men, they visit Greenwich, who's in prison, for the assassination attempt on Professor X. And Jean Grey, she proves his mind using the machine Cerebro to amplify her psychic ability because she's still at the X Mansion because she is with Child. And she tries to get into the mind of Trask. She locates Trask in this junkyard in the Sahara Desert. And while being in Cerebro, she receives a horrifying premonition. So at this point, the X-Men led by Cyclops, they all travel to the Sahara Desert to find Trask. On the way there, they are encountered by Sentinels and Master Mold, the supercomputer, and they defeat them. They defeat the Sentinels and destroyed Master Mold as well at that junkyard, and they managed to apprehend Trask. So later on, back at the X Mansion, you have Cyclops and Jean Grey. They are preparing to announce that they're going to leave the X-Men to raise their son in safety. And this doesn't take well with Wolverine. He's still smitten with Jean Grey at this point. So he's not feeling the decision. Actually, all of them have their doubts about it, because they don't want to break up the team. They feel that they all need to be together in this time since they don't have Charles. And it's a hard decision for Cyclops as well, but he knows for the safety of their child, this will probably be the best decision. But before all that could really go down, before it gets too heated between the X-Men, they're interrupted by none other than Magneto, who reveals that Charles Xavier gave him control of the X-Men and also the School for Mutants in his last will and testimony. And this was like a mic drop moment at the end of the episode when Magneto uttered the words, "To me, my X-Men." I was like blown away with that. I was that was a cool intro into this new iteration of X-Men, the animated series, or amply titled X-Men 97, because one is the title of the episode. You're always going to get the title of the episode uttered in some form throughout the show, any show that is, but we already heard it earlier from Cyclops, and for it to be turned around on all of them and be uttered by Magneto at the end of this episode was fire, I must say. Also on that same day, because they released 2 episodes to premiere this show, was episode 2, Mutant Liberation Begins, and Magneto, he began saving both humans and mutants alike and refraining from killing any anti-mutant militias. He really turned it around after his last encounter with Professor X, because they, at the end of the day, I don't care if it was in the comics, on the animated show, or in film, Magneto and Charles Xavier were always besties, and they were the best description. Everybody used this description. They're Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., all trying to achieve the same goal, yet deciding to go different paths to achieve that goal. One is nonviolent and one is by any means necessary. And Magneto was by any means necessary. But he turned the corner here this season, to open this season, and I think everybody was skeptical. Like, when's the ball going to drop? When is he going to go full Magneto this season? But the distrustful Cyclops at this point, and Jean Grey, as well. All the X-Men, but mainly Cyclops. He voiced his opinion a lot. They still decide to leave with the X-Men, and Rogue, she sympathizes with Magneto's struggles. And this was kind of a gut punch to Gambit, because Gambit all this time is like trying to woo it's a Rogue, because Rogue can't touch him, and it's just been detrimental to their relationship. That they can't have any physical contact, and Gambit is the type, he wants to snuggle, and Rogue is like, I can't do it. But we learned that Magneto can snuggle up with Rogue because he can use his little magnetic field around him that Rogue's powers won't affect him. And so this was the seed for that's going to play out later on this season. And so the UN forces led by Dr. Cooper attempt to arrest Magneto for his past terrorism. He at the end of the day, you can't hide the fact that he was a terrorist. He committed a lot of terroristic acts on human beings in his quest for mutant liberation. But he agrees to surrender and face a trial to prove himself as a changed man. So during the trial at the UN headquarters, you have the Proud Boys, or the Friends of Humanity. They stage an attack, and their leader, the Executioner, shoots at Magneto with this radiation blast that can depower a mutant. And so as he shoots at Magneto, Storm takes the hit for him, not knowing that this is what that blast would do. And now, just to back up a little bit, in I think the first episode, Storm and Jean Grey had a little heart-to-heart about humans. Or it could have been early on in this episode. But either way, before this happened, they had a talk about humans. And Jean Grey was expressing to Storm that she didn't know what the child was going to be. Is the child going to be human? Is the child going to be a mutant? I'm scared for that. And they got into a deeper discussion on wanting to be human. Do you want to be human? Or, and it was a very deep conversation because, a lot of disenfranchised groups or minorities then had these conversations. A lot of people have had these conversations, whether it's the LGBTQ community or the black community, the Latino community, whatever it is, they've had these conversations. Why can't I be this so I can live like peacefully, instead of being ridiculed, instead of being persecuted? Why can't I be normal, or what society, certain sections of society see as normal. But at the end of the day, we're all normal, but that's a whole nother discussion. Anywho's, they had this talk about that, and Storm decided, or not decided, but told Jean Grey that she is proud to be a mutant. It was almost like I'm black and I'm proud. It was a really, really cool conversation that they had. I say all that to say this, leading up to this moment when she took that depowering radiation blast from the Executioner. Now she lost her abilities. Now she is normal. And man, that was worse than death. And the way it played out on the show, it was devastating to Storm. Storm is a goddess. I had this discussion a few weeks ago with my cousin, and he sent me a reel about who would beat who's more powerful than who. And we all agreed it was Storm because Storm was on that list. I'm like, Storm is powerful. She is one of the most they just don't display it like it should be displayed. But Storm is a beast and one of the most powerful mutants or superheroes overall, in my humble opinion. But now she's left powerless. She's a normal human being at this point. And so we go back to the X Mansion, and Jean Grey has went into labor, and Rogue is forced to assist her. So they go to the hospital, and it's a normal hospital, and of course, the doctors there are racist. They don't want to treat a mutant. They don't want to perform this birth on a mutant because they're racist, and is the liability factor. You know, you don't know what she's giving birth to, and all this here. And so Rogue is forced to absorb the doctor's knowledge about giving birth, you know, assisting in the birth. And so this is after he refused, of course. And so Jean gives birth to a son. And let's not forget, Cyclops is at the UN with Magneto and Storm and all that. So they're in the midst of that. But after all that's wrapped up, said and done, he does get to the hospital and is able to witness the birth of his son, who they named Nathan. And we all know that Nathan is a big part of the X-Men lore, especially he will later go on to become Cable, who we've seen in live action before, played by Josh Brolin in in Deadpool 2. They gave birth to Nathan. And so Magneto, he apprehends the executioner and stops the assault, and he's pardoned. And discussions began for the mutant nation of Genosha at this point to join the UN. And so Beast, he tells Storm that the blast did permanently take away her powers, and she leaves the team to find a new meaning on life. So while discussing her decision, the X-Men, they receive a knock at the door. And so Morph, he goes to open the door, and who is standing there? Nothing but a woman who looks identically like Jean Grey. And that's where the episode ends. I was like, okay, we're going into Madeline Pryor territory now. There's some deep cuts we about to get in this show. And so I was super excited after episode 2 went off the air and all worries were set aside. We move over to episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. And this episode, Beast, he determines that the Jean lookalike is the real Jean Grey. And so now the plot thickens even more. And so the one that showed up at the door is the real Jean Grey. And the one who's been living amongst the X-Men all this time, currently pregnant. Well, not pregnant, I'm sorry. Currently giving birth to Cyclops' child is not Jean Grey. And so now Mister Sinister, it makes his first appearance in this season, and he contacts the other Jean, revealing her to be a clone he created to gain access to her and Cyclops' DNA. And so Mr. Sinister takes control of her mind, turning her into the Goblin Queen. And at this point, she gives Nathan to Sinister and subjects the X-Men into these horrific visions based on their own fears. And so you have Morph, who was previously corrupted and controlled by Sinister. He leads the X-Men to one of Sinister's labs, where they find him infecting Nathan with this techno-organic virus under the belief that it was going to make the child invincible. Not invincible. Not that invincible, but invincible. The real Jean Grey, she confronts the Goblin Queen and telepathically uses their shared memories to free her from Mr. Sinister's control. So the clone of Jean Grey and Cyclops, they save their son, Nathan, who is left almost dead, close to death, gravely ill, while Sinister, he escapes the X-Men at this point. So the clone Jean Grey gives Nathan to Bishop, who we all know is a time-traveling ally of the X-Men, who suggested that maybe in the future they can find a cure for this virus because presently, there's nothing that's around that can save him. And so they agree to take him to the future and allow him to go. She then takes on the name of Madeline Pryor and leaves the team. Elsewhere, a mutant called Forge, he introduced himself to Storm and claims that he can restore her powers. This is where episode 3 ends. Episode 4, which was a split episode, Motendo and Life Death Part 1. This episode was the first half was a Jubilee Roberto episode, and the second half was Storm and Forge. Let's start off with the first half, Motendo, and this was a throwback villain from the animated series that was obsessed with video games and 90s culture around that time. Well, I ain't gonna say obsessed with the culture because that was the culture at that time, but he didn't grow up. It's still the same here. We pick up with Jubilee. She's celebrating her 18th birthday, and she decides to go to the arcade. But Magneto refuses. He tells the team to focus on training. And so Roberto, he consoles Jubilee, and he surprised her with a Motendo video game in her room, and the pair are pulled into the video game based on her previous adventures, created by a slave master, Mojo. Mojo was the villain that we were talking about before from the animated series. And so he feeds off of the audience engagements. So he was basically YouTube. And so we got, and so Jubilee, she's enjoying reliving her past missions, but is convinced by an older digital copy of herself that was in the game's digital version or beta version, I should say, that she would be living an empty life if she stayed there. And so the older version helped Jubilee and Roberto defeat Mojo, and the pair return to their real world, and Jubilee kisses Roberto. And so that's how that section of the episode ends. Then we flash over to Life Death Part 1, where Forge takes Storm to his ranch where he created a machine that can restore her powers, though it seems to fail after a couple of attempts. And Storm noticed a strange owl flying over the ranch around this time. And Forge, he admits that he designed the technology that inhibits mutant powers, i.e., the radiation gun that Executioner used to zap her of her powers. And so indirectly, it was Forge's fault why she doesn't have her powers. And this is how she interpreted, and she leaves. Understandably, she's mad. And so the owl reveals itself to be a demon called Adversary, and it brings Storm back to the ranch and poisons Forge. And that's how this episode as a whole came to an end. And so this was a very interesting episode. It sets up some things going forward. But in typical X-Men animated series fashion, we get a part 1 of episode cliffhanger. But that's not, part 2 is not what we get in the next episode. The next episode, episode 5, is probably the best episode of this show. Well, one of. It's the best. It's definitely the most emotionally draining episode, and came out of nowhere. Everybody has talked about it, and it's entitled "Remember It." And when you saw that title, and when you find out why that's the title of this episode, as we got to the end, it brings tears up your eyes. I'm getting emotional now thinking about it. But episode 5, Remember It, picks up with the actual Jean Grey, struggling to tell which memories belong to her and which memories belong to Madeline. And so Jean reveals her emotional confusion to Wolverine. And during this interaction, she kisses Wolverine. And Wolverine, I think, did the most big boy thing you can do in this moment. You know, he tells her that, look, you belong to Scott. That's your man's. I can't do that. You know, even though that kiss was probably the greatest thing in Wolverine's life, the thing that he wanted the most out of life, but he couldn't go forward with it because one, it felt like cheating. You know, it's like he's taking advantage of the situation, and that's not what he wanted to do. And so after he rejects her advances and tells her to talk with Scott, we find out that Scott, or Cyclops, is having a quote unquote affair, a mental affair, communicating with Madeline Pryor through telepathy, with Madeline using that to communicate with Scott. Because even though they're two different people, they're the same person. You know, they still have the same emotions, still have the same feelings and love for the same people. So she still loves Scott, you know, and they do share a child together, despite the fact she's not actually real. I think this was a cool little dynamic to travel through, between this love triangle. If that's if it's really a triangle, it's more. We got to dive into algebra or trigonometry to try to come up with a different prism here. But it is such a weird triangle that these three are going through here, because all three have a case. You understand, Scott? You understand? Like, I mean, honest, you know, yeah, she a clone and all, but I've been living with this woman for over a year. Well, actually, you want to go back even further, because this split happened. I want to say right after the Dark Phoenix saga, or it could have been during. My memory is a little fuzzy on that, but it's been a while. And so technically, Madeline Pryor is the one he's truly in love with. So Jean Grey has been gone, has been missing. And so that's not the real person that he loves. And so it's a whole thing. Anyways, we get Magneto, Rogue, and Gambit. They travel to Genosha, where there's a council there that's asking Magneto to lead the country. And he agrees to, and with some convincing, he agrees to do it on the condition that Rogue leads with him, because they have kind of developed this new relationship that they have. Rogue explains to Gambit that she has had a secret relationship with Magneto in the past when she was younger, because his abilities allow her to touch him without hurting him. And that's just something Gambit can't do. And heartbreaking doesn't begin to describe how that feels, man, because Gambit is no fault of his own. And we all have had those type of relationships and those breakups that is you know, the typical "is not you, is me." You know, that speech. It's so heartbreaking, man, because Gambit just simply adores Rogue, man. He loves Rogue, but he just can't break through. But she kind of breaks up with him, even though they weren't technically in a relationship there, or let him down easy with that. And so they have this gala to celebrate Genosha joining the UN. And at this gala, Rogue kisses Magneto. And while kissing him, she realizes that she made a mistake choosing him over Gambit. And so she leaves Magneto there. And look, Rogue, I hated her right there at that moment. I'm like, man, why are we playing these games, man? Why are we doing this? It's so, I don't know, man. I guess because those games been played on me before. It sucks. It really does suck. But we didn't have time to kind of soak into that, because we got into the meat of this episode at that point. Cable, yes, the son, Nathan Summers, he pops up. The time traveling Cable, he arrives in Genosha in search of Madeline, his mother. And Madeline realized that he is the adult Nathan. That is her son. And Cable is sent back to the future before he can warn everybody of what's to come. And this episode, I think right before that little scene happened, we got a little Easter egg of the Watcher in the far distance in the skyline. We saw his eyes glowing. He's watching over this event. And that's normally a indication in the comics that something major was about to take place. And so he's sent back right before he's able to tell Madeline Pryor, his mother, his actual mother, biologic mother, what was about to come. And what was coming, it was none other than an upgraded Master Mold and an army of Sentinels that attacked Genosha and killed thousands of mutants. It was a genocide like no other. These Sentinels, and this was the first time, even in comics and going back to the animated series, this was the first time on this show that I felt the dread of a Sentinel. Even in the films, it was, I hate the depiction of them in the, I think it was Days of Future Past in the movie. I didn't like the depiction of the Sentinels in any film form. But on this show, on this episode in particular, I actually felt the horror and the terror from these Sentinels. Man, the way they were laying waste to this country was unbelievable. So you have Magneto, you have Rogue, you have Gambit. They're trying to fight back. They're trying to save all of the mutants there, some humans that were there as well, trying to fight back these Sentinels and Master Mold. And Gambit, oh my God, he made the ultimate sacrifice. He charging up to Master Mold. Master Mold gets him, stabs him, impales him. But in being impaled and having a part of Master Mold inside of him, the Gambit was able to charge up his kinetic energy and turn Master Mold into one of his exploding devices. And in his last breath, his last words, the name's Gambit. Remember it. And boom, destroys Master Mold. Oh my God. It was, and then the way the show holds, they held on to the devastation. We're seeing clips of it. We're seeing reactions from it. And then we see Rogue holding Gambit in her arms, and she's crying, and she's touching him. She finally touches him, and she says, "I can't feel you." And the episode ends. Bruh, I'm about to cry now. Bruh, this episode tore me up. I was in complete awe after this episode. I couldn't believe that they pulled this off and killed an X-Men. Not just any X-Men, but Gambit, a fan favorite. But he went out like a G. He went out like a soldier, bruh. This was probably one of the most awesome sacrifices I've seen on this show. Unbelievable episode. Unbelievable. Emotionally, story-wise, everything wrapped up in this one episode. Oh my God. And in a lot of episodes or a lot of seasons of TV shows, you normally get this in the middle. And this was the middle portion of the season. You normally get a big moment, a big episode, and then you're set back and you're like, okay, where do we go from here? That's what I asked here. That's what I asked here as well. Where do we go from here? Because this was amazing. It, it can't get any better than this. And so, yeah, episode 5 was amazing in this first season of X 97. Uh, we get to episode 6, and now we get part 2 of Life and Death, and we pick up, really, still not getting to the conclusion of the storm little part first off, but we pick up with a war between the Shia and the Kree empires, and the Empress of the Shia, she announces her engagement to a now healed Charles Xavier. Yes, he's alive. We finally, it took 6 episodes, but we finally get Professor X. Refusing to accept her sister's marriage to a Terran or a human being, Deathbird invokes the right of I forgot what it's called, but it's like a fight to the death type deal. And he challenges Xavier to purge all his memories of Earth in order to prove his loyalty to the Shia. And so Xavier, of course, refuses. He refused to renounce his memories of the X-Men, and this results in a battle between the Imperial Guard and Deathbird supporters until Charles Xavier puts everyone into this astral plane type deal. He projects them into this and has school. He conducts a class where he educates them about coexistence. And when the lesson is interrupted by a psychic vision of Gambit's death, Charles, he decides to return back to Earth. And so we finally get some resolution there. Now Charles is on his way back to be with his X-Men. And so now we arrived back at the ranch where Forge uses his mother's spell book to expel the demon. And then Storm helps him search for a rare cactus that can cure the poison that he's been injected with. Storm finds the cactus inside of a cave, but is cornered by the adversary once again. And so she overcomes her fears, and Storm regains her powers and defeats the adversary. And that was a cool moment when she got her powers back. Real cool visuals as well. I like that about this episode. Storm, she heals Forge after returning with the cactus, and then they learn about the attack that just took place on Genosha. And elsewhere, we have Bolivar Taz. He is confronted by Mister Sinister, who warns that Genosha was just the beginning. So that's where we left off at after episode 6. Real good, decent episode. Not as epic as the episode that preceded it. I wasn't expecting it. But it still had some pretty good moments that took place to keep the party going. We move on to episode 7, Bright Eyes. And in this episode, the X-Men hold a funeral for Gambit. Rogue, she's angry. She's searching for Get Rich and Bolivar Trask, and she's wanting revenge. She wants her pound of flesh for the death of her loved one, Gambit there. And so she gets some information from General Thunderbolt Ross, and from awesome cameo here from Captain America. And so she's able to get this information, and Rogue, she finds Getrich in Mexico and absorb his memories. And so Getrich is murdered later that night. And while assisting with the recovery efforts in Genosha, the X-Men are contacted by a terrified Trask at this point, because he knows he's next on the list. So he tells them that he's in Morpor. So they get Rogue on the way. And then we have Roberto and Jubilee. They are visiting Roberto's mother. And this was the X-Men's version of an outing, you know, of coming out into your parents type deal, for the LGBTQ community type situation. And so Roberto, he wants to tell his mother that he is a mutant, and she asks him to keep the identity secret. I already knew, like most parents do when it comes to the homosexual community. They know. They know it's really be them that is so terrified of confessing. But at the end of the day, close ones, loved ones, they know. And so, anywho, she's cool about it. She's not angry about it. She just asks him to keep it a secret. And so we get back to Morpar, and the X-Men learn that Mister Sinister and the UN secret little division there has been developing a highly advanced Sentinel program. And so Rogue drops Bolivar Trask to his death, unknowingly activating the program that turns him into this human Sentinel hybrid. And so it was all a setup there, because now he's after them. And so Cable arrives at this moment, and Cable defeats Trask with an what you call it, EMP, that magnetic pulse thing, and explains that Mister Sinister is working on a greater threat that they must stop. And it affects the future as well. And so this threat, who murdered Gidris, is Bastion. And he reveals to Mister Sinister that Charles Xavier is alive in space, and that Magneto, who is presumed dead after the Genosha attack — I left that out when we was talking about episode 5. He got swallowed up with the Gambit death, but he is presumed to be dead at this point. But he's alive, and he's a prisoner of Bastion. And so that's where we leave off in episode 7. Now we get into a 3-part finale here of Tolerance is Extinction. Part 1, 2, and 3, episodes 8, 9, and 10. And in part 1, the UN, it reveals to the world that Charles Xavier is indeed alive, inciting an anti-mutant protest outside of the school of the X-Mansion. And Cable explains to the X-Men that Genosha massacre that took place was the absolute point in time that cannot be changed. Cable explained he went back to that moment multiple times, and no matter how many times he went back, he could not change the past. So there was an absolute point in time that couldn't be changed, and Bastion will use it to start a 300-year war that will lead to the enslavement of mutants in a human utopia in the future. And so Cyclops, Jean, and Cable, they travel to Pennsylvania, where they learn that Bastion is a human-machine hybrid who is convinced, after his father is infected with part of this advanced time-traveling technology, he was the Sentinel, what is it? Nimrod, whatever. I forgot. I think Nimrod. That was his father. So members of this task force that's a part of the UN, they express concern over the massacre and ask Dr. Cooper to monitor Bastion, who explains to her how he is turning humans into these prime sentinels, like Trask was turned into that little hybrid sentinel as well. And so the way he does it is using Mister Sinister's techno-organic virus, the same virus that Cable it was injected with as a baby. And so the Prime Sentinels they become active around the world, and they start attacking mutants and burning down the X-Mansion and so on and so forth. So a horrified Dr. Cooper, she releases Magneto, who creates a worldwide blackout and kills thousands of people, and it shuts down all of the Prime Sentinels. And so Wolverine, he feels that Magneto has declared war as Xavier finally returns to Earth and he summons the X-Men. That's how part 1 ends, episode 8 ends. And boy, we're off to the races to an epic finale at this point. We jump to part 2 of Tolerance is Extinction. And Charles is met with just a little distrust. But the X-Men focus on stopping Bastion. You know, they don't trust the situation because he's been gone for over a year. And there was no contact, not even a text, email, nothing to say I'm alive, I'm good, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a little distrust there. But look, we got to stop this bigger threat. We'll address that after. They need to convince Magneto to reverse the blackout. And Magneto has reestablished his mutant haven, that asteroid M. And he's choosing to leave Earth without power, and he rejects Charles Xavier's dream of a mutant human coexistence at this point. And so he invites the X-Men to join him, which Rogue and Roberto do. They decide to join him. You know, Rogue at this point, she's lost. You know, she already turned her back on Magneto and chose Gambit only for 5 minutes later that piece to get moved off the board. So, you know, she's lost. She's searching for something, and she decides to choose to go back with Magneto. Roberto, he's trying to find his way. And so the rest of the X-Men, they return to their former base and they try to regroup, but they split up into 2 teams at this point. Cyclops, he's going to run the blue team, and they're going to go to the asteroid M and confront Magneto, while Storm and Jean, they're on the gold team, and they head to Bastion's hideout, while Beast and Forge, they create this collar that can block out Bastion's telepathy or whatever it is, technology, some power he got. Either way, it'll sever his control over the Sentinels. And so the gold team, they battle this army that's controlled by Bastion, as well as Mister Sinister, and he takes control of Cable's mind, and he uses him to overpower Jean Grey. And she sends a message, this little psychic message to Scott, to Cyclops. And so we're back on asteroid M, and Professor X attempts to take control of Magneto's mind, but of course he's blocked. And we get a we get a scene here that is straight out the comics. One of the most devastating scenes, or at least comic panels that I've ever seen. And this is when Magneto rips the adamantium out of Logan's body. And this is the scene at the end of part 2 where he does it. He does it, and we get to see it in not live action, but in motion, in animation form. And that's how the episode ends. And we speed off to part 3, the season 1 finale. Part 3, Tolerance is Extinction. Of course, we find Wolverine critically injured. He's close to death. Professor X, he takes control of Magneto finally, and he restores power to Earth and is fracturing Magneto's mind. In the process, Jean, she connects with the Phoenix Force, and she's able to place the collar on Bastion, restoring the Prime Sentinel humanity at this point, and reverses Mister Sinister's mutant, I guess, control over Cable as well. And so the X-Men fight to protect Bastion from crashing as for the asteroid M into Earth and causing a new extinction level event that would just pretty much wipe out humanity, wipe out planet Earth. And this prompts the U.S. government to launch missiles at the asteroid in hopes of destroying it. And so, with Professor X's help, Magneto, he regains consciousness and sends the asteroid into space, sparing Earth and the mutants that are there. And it explodes, and most of the X-Men are presumed dead at this moment. And so we fast forward 6 months later, and Bishop arrives and tells Forge that the X-Men are trapped in time. And so Cyclops and Jean, they have been catapulted into the future. They are in the year, I think, 3960 was on the show. Yeah, way in the future, a desolate future, where they encounter Rachel Summers, who is their daughter in the future, a young Nathan, and Rogue, and Nightcrawler, Beast, Charles Xavier, Magneto. They have been thrusted into the past in 3000 BC, and this is where they encounter a very young version of Apocalypse. And that's how the episode ends, and we get a mid-credit scene where Apocalypse finds one of Gambit's playing cards in present-day Genosha. So, or Genosha. And let me tell you, as far as how a season finale is supposed to go, this is how a season finale is supposed to go. This whole season was perfection in my eyes. In regards of X-Men, in regards of this is what I wanted. I got everything I wanted from this show. It continued everything that we knew and loved from the 90s animated series, and just expound upon that, still keeping that 90s vibe, but giving us the present day flair as well. And I love it, man. I love it. I love the direction this show is going. Can't wait for season 2 to see how are they gonna mess up this situation. I'm trying to say it in a PG version, edited way, but you know, how can they unmess up this problem? And I can't wait to see it. I am super excited. Hopefully it still keeps the same vibe going, being as though they switched showrunners, you know, with Bo DeMayo exiting unceremoniously. But I'm confident that we got a good season ahead of us. But that is the recap of X-Men 97 season 1. Oh man, can't wait for season 2. I want to know, are you excited for season 2 of X-Men 97? And I'm more excited of the promise that we're getting a new X-Men in the MCU live action properly. You know, I don't know if the rumors are true, if Sadie Sink is truly Jean Grey in Spider-Man Brave New World, or not Brave New World, Brand New Day. We need to let Brave New World go elsewhere after that Captain America debacle. But I don't know if the rumors are true, if she is Jean Grey or not. Maybe she's Madeline Pryor. Who knows? Who knows what she is? But if she's a mutant and we're being introduced to the mutants and we're about to kick off the mutant saga in the MCU, I am super excited. And this show, X-Men 97, is a good way to keep the X-Men, the mutants, in our purview, in our minds and hearts, and just ramping up that excitement. But I want to know, are you excited? Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this recap of X-Men 97 Season 1. Of course, I'm going to be here for Season 2 with my reviews. Be on the lookout for that and other shows that may pop up on the KB Radio Network. I want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.